You're listening to the Agent and the Fan podcast with sports agent Chris Leible and fan Lou Columna.
Welcome, everybody, to the Agent and the Fan podcast. My name is Chris Leible. I'm the agent. I'm here with my man, Lou Columna. He's the fan. Lou, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm great, man. Can't complain. You know, both New York teams are in first place. The draft is behind us. You know, we have summer baseball coming, and we have a lot of great things to start talking about soon.
Well, we got to get past the weather because it seems like it hasn't stopped raining since November here in the Northeast, and I'm kind of tired of it. All the kids' games keep getting rained out and pushed back and logged onto each other, and it's so annoying. And going to the ballpark, whether it's a major league team or minor league team or whatever it is, it's been miserable. I'm hoping we can finally turn the corner, but I feel like I've been saying that for like 2 months now. So
I know, right? It's like pouring rain. Luck, you know, it's crazy. I think we only got one game canceled. It's just been, I guess it just has worked out for us, you know, with the kids.
Yeah, it's hit or miss. I know, like, one of my sons has played a lot of games, and the other one hasn't as much, and it's just been luck of the draw. But even like the games, the conditions are poor and whatever. But anyway, it is what it is. But we have a lot to talk about, and we have a very special guest who's going to join us in a few minutes. His name is Howie Karpin, and Howie is a official scorer for Major League Baseball. He works a lot. He's the main scorer for the Mets and Yankees games here in New York. Yep. And Howie's an old friend of mine. He's a great guy, really knowledgeable baseball guy, knows the game inside out, obviously knows all the rules, and he's the one behind making the scoring decisions. So it's going to be an interesting show, I think, to be able to talk to him and pick his brain and talk about some things. So I'm looking forward to getting into it with him, and he should be joining us in a second. But yeah, man, it's been a crazy first beginning of May, and so what are you thinking so far?
I mean, listen, if we're in New York, we can't complain, right? You know, both New York teams are in first place. You know, both doing it a little differently, right? You know, Aaron Judge is carrying the Yankees. I mean, he's batting near 400 now, 12 home runs. You know, Bellinger's starting to heat up, which is nice to see. You know, Max, Fried, Jesus. I mean, like, this guy has just been.
Yeah, Fried's been unbelievable. He's
everything you would have hoped for, you know. And on the Mets side, listen, Pete has maintained. You know, some people thought he was going to kind of go down a little bit, but Pete's been Pete. Soto's been heating up, you know, and now for you guys just got to get Vientos going. You guys will be all right, but it's
well. Don't say you guys, because I'm an agent back in the agent business now, so I represent players from all different teams, and I don't have a
you don't discriminate.
Team. I don't discriminate. Yes, I worked for the Mets for a long time, and I grew up a big Mets fan. But you know, if I have a client on another team, then that's who I'm rooting for. So
I like to hear that. Let's get some Yankee fans, some Yankees on your roster. Let's make it happen.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, we have Howie here. Let's bring him in. This is going to be great. Howie is phenomenal. So looking forward to it.
There he is. Howie, what's going on?
Hey, you guys. What's up, buddy?
Howie, what's going on?
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, anytime.
So, Howie, first, obviously, you and I have known each other for a long time, a very long time, going back into the 90s. And I mean, you've been doing this for a long time now. You've been an official scorer. I had set it up earlier before you joined us, but you've been an official scorer. Tell us how you got into that position.
Well, I started in sports media in 1980, and I had the privilege of working at Sports Phone, you know, which Lou wouldn't remember, but it got me started in my career, and it gave me a chance to cover baseball on a professional basis. So going to games, you know, I saw that official scorers were immediate types. You know, there weren't any specialized, just MLB personnel. It was people in the media, mainly print media. So I thought I could do it, you know, and after a little while of being in the business, I started to pursue it a little. And Phyllis Merridge, I'm sure you remember, Chris.
Phyllis is the best. Yeah, I saw her at Yankee Stadium not too long ago.
Yeah, well, I got friendly with her. I remember she helped me, you know, get a credential for the 1981 World Series, and got to know her over the next few years. And after a while, Bill Shannon, the great Bill Shannon, who was known as probably the best scorer in the country when he was working in the 80s, and Red Foley, they were the ones doing most of the games. And we had, 2 teams in town, 162 dates. That's a lot of games to cover. And those 2 were mainly doing almost every game. So Bill, after a while, realized that they weren't getting any younger, and they wanted to inject new blood into the system. So in the late 90s, I think it was 96 around, they started to ask Phyllis about it. And then finally in 98, early 98, they gave me, thanks to Bill and his, insistence, they gave me a chance to train. So I sat down with Bill for a game. And when there was a call to be made, Bill would look at me to see if I made a call. And then, for that game, we pretty much agreed. There weren't a whole lot of tough calls to make from what I gather and what I remember. So I did that one training day. And then in September of 98, it was a Friday night. It was actually September 11th. I remember the date. It was before 9/11, the real 9/11, unfortunately. But it was 3 years before. But Phyllis saw me in the press room, and she said, how'd the training go? And I said, fine. She said, Bill said you did okay. And she said, you want to do a real game? I said, sure. I figured maybe they may be saving me for the last game of the year when Yankees were great that year. So they were already, they had it in the bag. It wasn't going to be a really impactful standings-wise game. But she says, no, I need a scorer for Sunday, 2 days later. I said, okay. So they put me in Yankees Toronto. I did the game under a little supervision of a guy named Bob Elliott, who works in Toronto.
Bob's the best. I love Bob.
Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. Wrote the Blue Jays, and I'm not sure if he wrote the Expos, but he wrote covered Canadian teams forever. And he kind of like just was watching me to make sure I didn't screw everything up. The game went well. I had one, iffy call to make in the game. It was like a fly ball to deep left center field, and left fielder had to go a long way to get to it. Went off his glove. I called it a triple. It happened to be the correct call. And after the game was over, Phyllis said, "Okay, so you did okay, and we'll see about 99." And then 99. She hired me. The leagues were separate then. Katie Feeney was running the National League. Yeah. Phyllis ran the American League. So Phyllis hired me in the American League on a trial basis, 10 games. I did 10 games in my first year, which was, terrific. It was great. Just American League. And then at the end of the year, she gave me 2 playoff games, which was unbelievable.
Showed faith in you.
I only did 10 games. And then in 2000, Katie hired me in the National League to do the Mets. So from there, I've been doing both teams since 2000. This is my 27th year overall, and you may or may not know I just passed 1,500 games a couple of weeks ago.
I heard that. Congratulations on that. That's amazing. No, so I wanted to go back. So obviously, you and I met. I was working. You were you had just become an official scorer at that time. Back in the 90s, I was the official scorekeeper of the Mets games. I logged the games, each play for MLB for all the games, the Mets home games at Shea Stadium at that time. So I scored the games on that, but I was also working in the Mets PR department at that time. So I was doing that, and so I would always put the score. You have to put the scorer in at the bottom of the box score, right? And so we always had that. But it's funny you talked about Bill Shannon. I wanted to mention Bill. Bill. Unfortunately, we lost Bill. Bill was just the best of the best. I know you feel the same way, Howie. Just a great guy. Awesome gentleman, and just a really, really brilliant baseball mind. He knew the game inside and out. He knows every rule inside and out. And I now, you're not my guy for this, but whenever I have a rule question or anything like that, I would always call Bill. Unfortunately, we lost Bill some years back, but now you filled the role for me just like you filled it for him in the press box for most of the games. Bill was just a great guy. Red was a little bit gruff sometimes. Foley, as you had mentioned,
Right.
he can be a little cranky, but I was okay with Red. But Bill was a great guy, and Bill was a guy that when we had back then, we had the control room, and as they do now at Citi Field, we had the control room right next to the press box. So if there was a questionable judgment or we wanted to get a hit for a batter we felt was a hit, I know one thing about Bill would do, and I know you're the same way, Howie, although the rules have changed. But back then, I would say, hey, Bill, I think that was a hit. And Bill would say to me, well, I got it as an error. I think you should have made the play. And I would say, Bill, would you do me a favor and review it? And in between innings, he would come with me to the control room, and I would have them run the play back, and Bill would rewatch, and then he would make a decision. And he would change it if he felt like, you're right, Chris. I think you're right. The more I watch it, the more I think it was a hit. I'm going to change it. And he would change it. And that was really nice and fair. Now, we wouldn't be that free with Red because Red was a little grumpier and might yell at you. But Bill was always so great with that. And the one thing I wanted to say is when I changed over and became an agent, one of my clients was Bobby Abreu with the Phillies at the time. And the Mets were playing the Phillies, and there was a ball that he hit that was a questionable ball. And I believe they gave an error to the fielder. I want to say it might have been Marlon Anderson, and Bill was the scorer. And after the game, I went down to the locker room. I went down to the tunnel to see Bobby coming out of the locker room. And Bobby, I said, that was a tough one. I thought it might've been a hit. And he was like, I thought it was a hit too. I said, you know what? I know the scorer. I'm going to go talk to him. And obviously the rules have changed now, and I want to get into the rules. But back then I went up to Bill and I said, Bill, can you do me a favor and just double check that play? And sure enough, Bill changed it the next day, and Bobby got a hit instead of getting an error. And that was really important for me. It was early in my career as an agent, and Bobby was like, who is this guy? This guy just got me a free hit. And, I don't know how you did it. I've never had anybody advocate for me like that. So I'll never forget that, and I always appreciated that. And Bill, he did that for me with the Mets, but he also did it for me in my agent career. Obviously, the rules have changed, but Howie, tell us how it's changed since you've been doing this for 27 years.
Well, they've instituted an appeal system where the players can get directly involved. PR people used to get annoyed because it provided extra work when they had to file an appeal. They had to get the video, they had to write the appeal. Now they've created an app, from what I understand, that the players can just file it on their own. We used to get, appeals and the agent's name would be on it occasionally, or whoever filed it, the name was on it. We never made direct contact with anybody, either a player, agent, or whatever. But now they have it was negotiated into the last CBA that, players can go to this app, I guess, and, file a video and write out what they feel. To be honest with you, some of the players' responses are really, in foul territory. Let's put it that way. They don't line up with what actually happened.
Exactly. They're saying something else.
They're trying to sway it their way, and some of them now use the new analytical formulas like exit velocity, which, as a group, we try, look, if you're at a ball game, you don't need to tell me that a ball was hit 110 miles an hour. You hear it off the bat. You're right there. You see it. We don't ignore that, that a batter hits it hard. If the batter earns that, if he smacks it like a rocket and it goes under the guy's glove because he takes one step to his left and there's no way he's going to get in front of it, we're not calling that an error. I mean, we know when they hit it hard and things like that, but sometimes they say, oh, the ball was hitting this hole and the guy really couldn't get to it. And that's not true a lot of times, where the guy could get to it and it wasn't hit hard enough to where, your judgment would call it a hit. I'll be honest with you. I think I sent you that link where I was on ESPN last July. and I jinxed myself by saying I hadn't had an overturn in 3 years, and there was one overturn like right after that. That's the only overturn I've had in the last 4 seasons.
Howie, what do you attribute your success in this, right? And there's a level of respect that I've noticed that New York official scorers have over other cities. Why is that, you think?
Well, there used to be a narrative that you could sway the scorers in other cities to where they lean toward giving the guys hits. In fact, I heard a story where the scorers sometimes I'll just name a city. I don't know if it's exact in that, like Kansas City or Cleveland. They'd be sitting next to the PR guy himself, and then the PR guy may say, "You think that before the call is made, that's a hit, right?" And then they kind of swayed. But as Chris mentioned, Bill Shannon, he was right down the middle. I mean, we don't stiff players. To me, that's not Derek Jeter at shortstop. That's a major league shortstop. That's not Carlos Beltran in center field. That's a major league center fielder. So that one, that's how we view it. And two, I played the game, so I wasn't a major league talent. I did get scouted as a kid. I was a pitcher, first baseman, and outfielder because I was a lefty. But I played positions. I know what it takes to make a play. So I think that kind of helps me to make some judgment calls, besides knowing the game itself and watching it since I was 7 years old. I'll be 71 in a couple of weeks. So that's 64 years I'm watching ball games. I think I know the beauty of it is I think I know what I'm watching, and yet there'll be something that'll pop up that I've never seen before. So sometimes you just got to use common sense in making a call. And then, look, if they want to appeal it, the players or whatever, that's their prerogative. I've had one this year that's already been upheld. So, I don't get a whole lot of them, to be honest with you. I guess most people agree with the calls, which I'm thankful for. But it doesn't bother me if they overturn. I mean, I have this little credo that I use, and I tell people it's their toy and I get to use it. So, that's the way I approach the game. And I'm not nervous about it. Like last year I had a no-hitter going. You were talking about Max Fried before I came on. He started against the Mets at Citi Field, tossed 7 no-hit innings, and I had to take him out because of his pitch count. And then they got through the 8th, and they had a combined no-hitter going. A lot of people don't think that's a no-hitter, but the fans sitting in the stands, that's a no-hitter, and you may have to make a call. Now, J.D. Martinez broke it up with 2 out by hitting a home run. So he took the pressure off everybody in that regard. But, those are still – I've scored 2 of those. Those are still no-hitters in the books, whether people believe they're legit or not. So
that's awesome.
And there's only more of those coming because pitch counts and the game has changed so much.
So Howie, what is your career highlight?
Oh, there's a few of them. I mentioned the 2 no-hitters. I scored Roger Clemens' 300th win. He signed my card. It's one of the times you can take advantage of your access. I don't do that a whole lot, but I got him to sign my card because he also got his 4,000th strikeout in that game.
It was the Cardinals, right? I think it was against the Cardinals.
Yeah, he struck out Edgar Renteria for his 4,000th. And I did the final game in Montreal Expos history in 2004. Andy Chavez made the final out.
I have the jersey.
I did the final game at Shea in 2008. I actually did the first ever game at Citi Field. It was an exhibition game, Red Sox Mets. Bill did the opening games at both stadiums when they opened in 2009. There's a lot of highlights in there. I did a game where the Yankees won 21-0. There's so many games over the years. Obviously, the World Series. I've done 7 games. I did last year. I had the first double obstruction in playoff history. It was Yankees Cleveland,
yeah.
And Tim Hill got called for obstruction twice on the same play. Now, because of the level of obstruction, I have to either not call an error or call an error. Now, I had to wait really to make the official call because the MLB had to call the umpires to determine which obstruction was called. What happened was the player got a hit. He rounded first, and then he made contact with Tim Hill, but he wasn't really going to second. But then when he tried to go back, they threw behind him, and Tim Hill obstructed him once again.
Yeah.
So the umpires ruled the second obstruction that he was trying to go back. He obstructed, so they sent him to second base. So that resulted in an error on Tim Hill. If he wasn't given second base, the obstruction call wouldn't matter, so the scorer would not have to call an error. So there was a little bit of confusion there, and luckily I was able to handle that because the media guys were coming over and everything. So that was kind of unique. And, then I got to do my 7th World Series game. I did game 4, the only one they won. So, I've done all 3 World Series games at Citi Field in 2015. I did Lindor's Grand Slam game last year. That was another playoff game. So I've done 39 postseason games to go with my regular season games, which is now at 1,462. I'm at 1,501 for my career. So, I'm pretty proud of it. I hope I'm leaving a legacy when I'm all said and done.
Well,
no, I think you are. I think you are.
I think you are too. And I remember calling sports phone as a kid and getting in trouble by my mom for calling 976-1313 and having you on the line. And then we meet each other when I'm interning with the Mets in the 1990s. And next thing you know, but no, Howie, this has been great. It's great to have you on. I really appreciate it. I think it's good for our audience that we try and cover different aspects of the game. And obviously the official scorer is a very important part of the game and somebody who it's almost one of those things like an umpire. It's almost like they're doing a good job when you don't really hear much about it.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's hard though on your end because there's like an umpire, there's sometimes a tough call to make and you make the best call you can make. And, like you said, the game inside and out. And that's, for me, that's instant respect. And the fact that you always honorable. And just like you said, Bill Shannon, who mentored you in this, you always called it down the middle. There was no pretense. It didn't matter what, anything. You're just making the right call, regardless of who's doing it or what's being done. And I think that's, much respected around the game. And like Lou said, I was watching the game the other day. A guy hit a ground ball through the third baseman's legs. They ruled it a double. I said, what is going on here? And I thought of you because I knew you were coming on the show. And I said, Howie would never rule out a double. That was an error all the way.
Howie, before we let you go, though,
I think that would come under appeal. I think that's going to come under appeal.
I'm pretty sure they had to have
because there were runs involved. If there's runs involved, it's probably going to be appealed.
I would imagine, yes.
But Howie, before we let you go, what is one of your funniest stories or one of those moments in your career that kind of stick out in a funny way?
Well, it's funny because Chris worked for the Mets and he knows Gary Cohn. Gary is big on the scoring, especially out of town. And we had an incident with Gary in 2002. I guess I could tell you the story. You can actually look it up on the internet because it made the newspapers. I was doing a Royals-Mets game, and the bases were loaded for Brent Maine, who was on the Royals.
Yeah.
Backup catcher, not fast. He hit a slow dribbler, like a swinging bunt, but it had a little more oomph to it, to Edgardo Alfonso at third. And he falls down, slips coming out of the batter's box. Now, for some strange reason, Alfonso tries to barehand it, like he has to make a barehand play to throw him out at first, and he boots the ball. So I call E5, no RBI, because there's 2 out. And Bill Shannon was at the game, and he came up to me and he said, a lot of scorers may have called that a hit. And he said, I agree with you. I wouldn't call that a hit in that instance. I said, Bill, he fell down and he's not fast. And Bill said, yeah, you're right. So anyway, I thought that was the end of it because the Royals said nothing at the time. That was like the 6th inning. So Bill would, when he wasn't scoring, he would be like a reporter and he would cover the whatever locker room the AP would send him to. So they sent him to the Royal Room. And what I gather is they surrounded him down there because they knew he was a scorer and they thought he was working the game. And apparently Brent Maine was really miffed at the call. So I had gone down to Bobby Valentine because I knew it was a controversial call. Sometimes I would just go down to interact with the manager so he'd get to know me, and I asked Bobby about it, and he was annoyed they lost that game to the Royals. And he said it was a tough error, but yeah, it should have been an error. And I also pointed out how Maine fell down. And Bobby said, yeah, you're right. He slipped coming out of the box. So anyway, I went back upstairs, and the late Shannon Ford, God rest her soul, she said, the Royals are on the press box phone. They want to talk to you. I said, okay. She goes, wait, they're going to ambush you. They're going to put Brent Maine on the phone, right? So I get on the phone. It's the PR guy. Did you look at the call? I said, yeah, and I'm not changing it. I'm sorry. Guy fell down. It's not fast. He easily could have gloved the ball and thrown him out, but rolled the ball at first. I didn't say that. Could have rolled it to first and gotten him out. He goes, Brent Maine wants to talk to you. First words out of his mouth. How can you make that effing call? I mean, really angry tone. I say, look, you fell down coming out of the batter's box, and he couldn't deny it. And then I said, in my judgment, that's an error. Then he goes, that's horse blank judgment. Really angry. And then he cited another call I made earlier in the game that didn't involve him. It was a line drive. Mo Vaughn, all he has to do is stick his arms up to catch it, and it went off his glove in the right field. I called it an error. He says, how do you call an effing error on that one? I said, all you had to do is reach up and catch it. I said, in my judgment, that's an error. He goes, that's horse crap judgment. And then he slammed the phone down. So I thought it was over. So in the old days, we used to have to write out the box score form and then take it down to the PR offices. You knew where they were at Shea, Chris. You had to walk behind the broadcast booth to get to the elevator. Yep. So I'm walking to the elevator, and here comes Gary out of the radio booth, and we start arguing about the call. And then I said, look, I got to go. I got to get this to the PR department. I thought it was over. So I get a good call from my friend Lou Rose. He was watching. He was following the game on the radio. He said, Gary was all over you on the radio. I said, so that's his prerogative. That was a Sunday. Monday, I get a call from Bob Raceman of the Daily News, who writes the media column. And he starts talking to me about the call, starts interviewing me. So I tell my wife, yeah, I'm probably going to get my name in the Daily News tomorrow on the Tuesday. He had a Tuesday and a Friday column. I pick up the paper. It's the whole column is about that incident. He's talking about how Gary was getting all over me and said I made the call to suit my own agenda and, to give myself attention. And then Bill they were on WFAN at that time, the Mets. So Bill wanted me to get equal time, and then they refused to give me equal time. So the funny thing is, as it turns out, me and Gary are like good buddies now, Gary has complimented me so many times on the air, and those three are always talking about me. It's incredible. Anytime I'm doing a game and they talk about me, my phone starts to light up with text, and you got a shout out on the air. But most times it's been complimentary. I mean, Gary, this actually happened. Gary verbatim once called me the greatest scorer ever. I'm telling you, I couldn't believe it. I nearly fell off my chair. So, in fact, in my 1500th game, it was Phillies Mets a couple of weeks ago. They didn't bring it up until they had a problem with a call I made for Lindor.
There you go.
That was single and an error, and they were debating it. And I'll tell you one more funny story with that, because at that time Keith Hernandez would talk to me through the TV, even though I'm not watching the TV. There was a game against Miami where a guy had a ground ball, went through the first baseman's legs. I called it an error. So they were talking about it. The call hadn't been made yet. Keith goes, that's got to be a hit. So Gary goes, Howie's scoring tonight. He goes, we should wait. And then it turned out to be E3. So Gary goes, see? So Keith talks to the TV, goes, Howie, you wouldn't have called that on an error on me. And Gary says, yeah, you wouldn't have missed it.
That's funny. That's funny.
God. And there was one more. I'll give you one quick story. It was in the ESPN feature, the drop pop-up with A-Rod and Jeter. That I called an error on A-Rod, and then somebody said to me, you may want to look at it because Jeter bumps him in the back. And according to the rules, when they collide in the outfield, if a guy was right under it and the other guy runs into him, makes him miss the ball, the guy that runs into him gets the error. So that's what happened with Jeter. But originally I called E5, so it went E5 on the board, and then I changed it about a half inning later because I saw the video. But Jeter didn't know it was changed. And, that was at the height of their feud because Jeter really, he really dissed him after that. You see him walk away and doesn't even want to look at him or nothing. Yeah. And apparently Cashman had spoken to Jeter and said, you're not acting like a captain. This is before the media came in. Look at the video, right? Keep in mind that line. Look at the video. Then I got called downstairs to talk to Jeter about it because, a bunch of the reporters told me that he was pissed, because they told him, what about that error? And he goes, not my error. And then I spoke to him at his locker, and I said, look, you got to look at the video. I said, you bumped into him. According to the rules, I have to give you the error. And then I went back out at Yankee Stadium. The press elevator was, like right where the players walk in and go downstairs. So I'm standing at the elevator, and they were going out to Boston to go to play the Red Sox the next day. So they were getting on the bus, and Jeter saw me at the elevator, and he called me over, and we started talking again about it. And I said, look at the video, which is what Cashman said to him in a different context. I didn't know this until Ian O'Connor wrote this book called The Captain, an unauthorized biography. And he had called me to interview me about that incident. And then he wrote how Cashman got on him and said, look at the video. Anyway, that made the papers the next day again. Like Wally Matthews, who would bust my chops, said, oh, Jeter buttonholed me against the wall, which wasn't true. There was no physical contact or anything like that. But that became a very, famous incident. And obviously ESPN found the video and used it in that feature. So those are probably two of the most notable stories I have in my career.
And a illustrious career at that.
Yeah, that's great, Howie. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. And I think our audience is going to enjoy this a lot. But thank you so much, and thanks for everything you do. And we'll hope maybe we'll get you back on soon.
Anytime, just give me a call. We're buddies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
Howie,
you never need any clearance on something. You know who to call.
You know that I know. Well, you'll be getting calls from me when I'll be at the field with my kids in the middle of a tournament somewhere in the middle of God knows where, and I'll be going, Howie.
Exactly. Hold on.
Here.
I get a lot of those, including from Rich Marazzi, who's a rules expert, but he's not an expert on the scoring rules. So he's always asking me stuff. I think Rich.
I know I don't know him. I know the name, but I'll tell you what. Bill was always great. Obviously, you're my guy. Really, the other person that I have to say knows the rule book, and you mentioned him earlier, inside and out, is Bobby V. I mean, Bobby V. Yes. I mean, there's not too many people that know the baseball rules like Bobby V. I mean, that guy he's an like a walking encyclopedia, just like you, and he's amazing.
Another one, Buck Showalter.
And Buck's really good. I don't know Buck, but I work with Bobby when I was with the Mets, and Bobby's just amazing with stuff like that. It's funny. We sat with when Edgardo Alfonso got in. You mentioned Edgardo also. Edgardo, I was probably mad at you back then. I don't remember that incident, but I might have been mad because I was representing Edgardo at the time. But what do you call it? When Edgardo got inducted into the Mets Hall of Fame, we were. Bobby V was there, and I had my son with me. He was probably like whatever it was, 7 or 8 at the time. And Bobby V was asking him, "Hey, what position do you play?" And he was telling him, and he gave him like 5 tips I had never even known. And my son was playing first base at the time, which was my position. He told him 5 things I had no idea about that were like genius things that you never would think of. That's Bobby V's unbelievable.
Can I give you one more quick story? Not a scoring story, but So, do you remember Tommy Giordano, T-Bone?
Yeah.
Yeah, he passed away in 2019. He was Lou. This guy was a baseball lifer. He was still scouting in his 90s for the Braves.
Oh my God.
He would be a lot of New York events. He did the New York area. What a gem. My only regret was not getting to know him earlier in my career. But he was a panic. We used to have this. He had this inner circle of friends. Yeah, everybody knew him. I mean, the waiter, the people who worked the press room, dining room, would always serve him food, bring it over, and all kinds of stuff.
John Esposito, remember?
Yeah, remember John? Sure. Anyway,
the one-man department with the Mets. They couldn't put him in a department because he was just the press room attendant.
Right. So they would take care of Tommy, who was known as T-Bone. He actually played in the major leagues, 11 games in the 40s. But anyway, he was the GM for the Orioles in '83, had a championship ring and all that stuff. He scouted like Manny Ramirez, Cal Ripken, I think Dansby Swanson. He helped sign for the Braves. Anyway, we got friendly. So one September, it was 2017, he was scouting the Yankees in case they played the Braves in the World Series that year because the Yankees were having a good year. And he said to me, he gave me a homework assignment. He says, give me a scouting report on the Yankees. I said, okay. So I worked on it for a couple hours, wrote a number of things down that I thought that he would, take interest in. So he took the paper I typed it. He never typed. He wrote everything out, never used a typewriter. He was really old school.
They all did.
So anyway, in late October, I get a letter from him and with a note and with the actual report, a copy of the report that he submitted to the Braves. And that he was very complimentary. He goes, I enjoy, your views and discussing, our great game. He loved baseball like I do and like you do, you guys do, I'm sure. But he gave me a copy of the report, and I noticed at least two things that I actually told him he put in there. One was when Aroldis Chapman gets up to 20 pitches in an inning, he loses something off his fastball. So they wrote that in there. And then I wrote how Brett Gardner was weak going to his left to cut off balls in the gap. And he wrote that in there. And I was so flattered that he put those into the actual report, that he took my word for it. And I still have it at home. I still have the note and the report here. And he passed away on Valentine's Day in 2019. So I treasure that to this day. And it's those relationships. It's like meeting Chris, and meeting you, Lou, and people I've met over the years. And Willie Randolph took me in. I was a young reporter, never turned me down for an interview, was always gracious. I got to know a number of the Yankees. And, when I was a scorer, it's funny. I'll finish up with this. A lot of the writers were, from the old boys network, let's put it that way, very stubborn and not open to the new technologies and things like that. So they didn't really look at me as a threat, for their job, because all I did was carry a tape recorder, and they didn't have a lot of respect for that. So their view of me totally changed when I became a scorer. Now, Phyllis took some friction in the early going from some of the writers when I did get the job. I heard that from a number of sources. So, but, ever since then, the media, I get along great with the media guys. They all know me. They all know they can come up to me, and meeting the broadcasters and the players. It's really rewarding, a rewarding part of the job that I treasure to this day.
Well, Phyllis is a great lady, and she obviously made a great choice in tabbing you as an official scorer, and we appreciate you coming on, Howie. Thank you for everything. We will see you soon, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, guys. Anytime you need me, I enjoy coming on.
Sounds good.
Howie.
Thanks, Howie.
All right, buddies.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So that was great, Lou. Howie's got a lot of stories.
We could definitely do a part two.
Yeah, we could probably keep going on, and I could go on because I started in the scouting department with the Mets, and when he started talking about Tommy, it was that brought a lot of memories of the old school scouts and stuff like that. So that's how I got one of the things I did at the beginning of my career is I converted a lot of those reports from the old school handwritten guys onto making sure they were all up to date and online and all that stuff.
Making sure your guys got the hits.
No, this was when I was still with the Mets. I didn't have guys then. But no, that was great. It was great to have Howie, and thank you for such a great interview. It was great to have him. But Lou, what else we got? Because I think we're running out of time here.
You know what we have? Miami Minute. Let's go.
Okay. Here we go. We're going to make this quick. Miami Minute, number one. Ironically, number one is number one. He wears number one. He was the number one pick in the draft. He's our faithful king, Cam Ward. Cam Ward, this guy earned everything he got. He went from a 0-star recruit to being the number one pick in the draft. He's going to turn the Titans organization around. Warren Moon, who's an awesome guy. I've had a chance to, who was involved with one of my old companies. Great guy. Was nice enough to take the number out of retirement, give it to Cam. Cam's going to do him proud by what he does on and off the field. He's a tremendous kid. He's a tremendous quarterback. I can't wait to see what he's going to do. I can't wait till September to see what he's going to do with the Titans and how he's going to start turning that organization around. But you could already start seeing it, the positive vibes and all the things, the way he handles himself. Not going to get into anybody else in that draft, but this guy, the Titans got the right guy, and I'm standing by that for as long as I can. Number one. Number two, touched upon it last time. I'm going to continue on. Break up the Hurricanes baseball team. JD Arteaga still has it going on. This team is on absolute fire. They are on verge of cracking into the top 25. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. Big series coming up. But I'm telling you, what is going on in Coral Gables right now with that team is something special. And I am so happy for JD because this guy is a Miami lifer and he's awesome at what he does. And I'm so happy this is all coming together for that group. Jonathan Anderson, the whole staff down there, really happy with the way they're going. Keep up the good work. That's the Miami Minute. And I think that's enough for today, Lou.
That is. Just please follow us on YouTube and rate us. That'll help us. And Chris, I think you're going to be right about number one. I really do. I wasn't a believer, but I'm believing.
Well, if we have enough Miami Minutes, we'll cover it. Also, big congratulations to all the other Miami Hurricanes that got drafted and ended up signing with teams. Elijah Arroyo, remember that name. All right, guys, thanks for everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Later.